Hey folks, David Stewart here. The WGA, the World Canadian Bureau, is on strike again. Now, before I go any further about my commentary with this, you can get my newest book, Demon Ex Machina, on sale on Amazon, or you can actually get it for free by joining my mailing list. I'll have a link down below in the description. It's about, what if there was a demon in the AI? So you can check that story out. Writers Guild of America, not actually the World Canadian Bureau, that's the old South Park joke. I don't know if people even remember South Park at this point or how relevant it is, but they're on strike again. And I wanted to make a couple of points, some of which are going to be obvious and some of which are going to be maybe less obvious. So the first one is that writers are paid really poorly in Hollywood. This maybe surprises a lot of people who aren't aware of the way things work. About 10 years ago, I remember a guy who was acting as our agent, who was actually a producer with another production company, with my screenwriting partner and I. He was trying to get us a writing room job just to fill time for us. And these were really very poorly paying jobs, especially for the amount of work. So they'd be like really intense stints, like 6 or 8 weeks, and they would pay very low amounts of money for what you got. So if you were doing nothing but writing room gigs all year long, you'd be making about minimum wage in LA, which LA is a place where you can make $100,000 a year and be broke. You really can. Like my rent was $2,200 a month, and that was 10 years ago. So writers in general are paid very poorly, at least when they're like hired contract writers. What I think tends to break this up is people hear about somebody selling a script for like $100,000 or something like that. And the truth is, if you're selling a movie script, you're probably not selling very many of those. It's really rare to sell a lot of movie scripts. I think Blake Snyder, who wrote Save the Cat, which is this, it's this screenwriting manual that, I don't know, Hollywood really likes. And I actually don't think it's not a very well-written manual, and I also don't like what it directs writers to do, but I could talk about that in some other piece of content. Anyway, he only ever sold 2 movies. It was Stop or My Mom Will Shoot and the movie Paycheck, neither of which I would consider particularly good movies. I guess they're entertaining, kind of funny family movies, I guess. But most people would not see this and be like, well, obviously this guy's a master writer. He's a master writer in one level, which is that he knew how to take a formula and apply it to the screen so that you get a really consistent and very predictable kind of product at the other side. And that's why Hollywood likes it. And I'll talk about that in a second. But it's pretty rare that you're going to sell a lot of scripts. So I think a lot of young writers try to get into Hollywood hoping to someday make money on something further down the line, and they end up doing really poorly paying for hire work while like waiting tables and stuff like that. So writers are paid really badly, and the writing is one of the cheapest parts of any production, especially when you're looking at the more expensive the movie, proportionally the cheaper the writing actually is. So the biggest budget for like a blockbuster is going to be special effects. The next one is actors, and you're usually spending more on catering than you're spending on writers. By the time you get down to the bottom, even if you've paid a lot to buy a script and you're paying people to rewrite that script, it ends up being a very, very small part of production. And the weird part is, almost always it's the worst part of the movie. When I am rating a movie negatively, it's the writing that is near universally the problem with the movie. The production is always really good. The acting is usually really good. The problem is the writing. The writing is simply poor in Hollywood. Now, is it because there's bad talent? Let's say we're going to raise the rates of the poorly paid Hollywood writers. Would that attract more talent? And I believe the answer is no. And so this is a point that I've seen a couple people make on Twitter with this, is that there are so many writers and there's such a stacked talent pool. There are great writers who are willing to work basically for free. There's no upward pressure on the price of writing at all. So if you raise the wages, you'd just be raising the wages of already poor writers. They could hire better writers in Hollywood, but they don't, because their system is kind of this insular system about knowing people. You take the writing room job to try to continue to build connections, which you maybe already have. Going into the whole Hollywood system. So Yeah, they're paid poorly. If you raise their wages, that wouldn't improve writing. Writing is already the worst part of every production. So when you have threats like, if we don't pay the writers more, if we don't end the strike, then you're going to lose some of your favorite shows. I'm like, that's a toothless threat to me, because I don't see Hollywood producing much of anything that is good. And most of the things that I see that are good are produced at least somewhat outside of the Hollywood system. They're produced outside the state of California. They're hiring people outside of the state. They're adapting things that started as books and therefore start with a better quality writing base. Now, if you were to really significantly jack up the prices and go out and try to hire the best novelists to write your movies, would that actually increase the quality of writing in Hollywood? So if you hired me to write the scripts, would that make them better? The answer is probably not. And the reason is because it's not the writers that are so bad. So I know I maybe just trashed all the writing, but it's actually, I think in a lot of ways, not the writer's fault. And it goes back to what I mentioned about Save the Cat. Okay. Everything in Hollywood is produced to such a kind of squished into such a formulaic approach to making movies or making TV shows with really rigid time constraints, which we don't really have those anymore because of streaming yet. I don't know, that tradition has continued. Really rigid time formats, really rigid plot formats, to the point where there's like a beat sheet from Save the Cat where people are expecting the same events to happen in every single movie at the same minute in every single movie. And once you're aware of these things, like, you could feel them happening. Okay, hero's about to fail. There's going to be a Dark Night of the Soul where him and the sidekick have a conversation about how bad things are. Then they come up with an idea that solves the problem, and then that's the end of that's the climax of the movie. You see that in every single movie. So once you are aware of what is happening with that, it's really easy to just know what's going to happen in any movie. They're very formulaic. So even if you write a really original script, what'll happen is that it'll get rewritten to be squished into the Save the Cat formula, and what comes out at the other end will be a kind of mushy mess. So even if you put good writers into it, they'll be so restricted by the formula, you probably won't have something very good coming out the other side. That's not to say the writers in Hollywood are actually good, because a lot of the micro level of writing is simply terrible in Hollywood, and that's the dialogue itself. So the way that characters speak to each other, like how a single line of dialogue is constructed, is often so bad that it's impossible to watch some of the shows that I've attempted to watch, like some of the, like Star Wars shows, which I talked about the other day. It's like whenever I see like a clip of them, I'm like, this is so bad. Like, I don't know how they get away with that. But I think maybe a lot of people in Hollywood are just so isolated from real culture, they don't know how people actually talk. Like, it's a lack of experience with human beings thing. They haven't seen enough of the world to get a bead on how characters are supposed to be. I'm not sure what it is, but there is a lot of bad writing on the micro level. But even if you solve that problem, you'd have a lot of predictable, boring shows because, well, it'd be very formulaic. The system, like the studio system, has an approach to writing stories that is going to be stifling to any creator. So where can you expect to have actually good writing? It's going to be somewhere outside the Hollywood system, either like a studio funded or but outside of California, or something made independently. That's where you're going to get things that are actually original and probably worth watching. Now, there's a little bit more here, and I guess the last thing I'll say is that let's pretend that this strike lasted forever and there was no more Hollywood shows produced. Is that a net negative? It's only net negative if you are an in-the-moment millennial consumer, and that's the argument that I see. So we got to end the strike because what if my favorite show doesn't continue? It's like, dude, there has been so much media produced, even in the last 10 years, that you will never get to the end of it in your lifetime. You could watch a new movie, a movie that you haven't seen every night, and it would be very difficult to run out of movies before you died. Of good movies, even, right? Because there's 100 years worth of movies to watch, more than 100 years worth of movies to watch if you're going back into the silent film era. So, yeah, that's just movies. Think about all the books that have been written. There's like 100,000 books a year published. So you'll never run out of things to consume. But consumers want things that are pre-filtered and put on a plate for them, that are familiar. They like the formula. And I guess that's I don't know what to call it, like a black pill about this, is that your standard normie consumer, your standard millennial consumer that's obsessed with brands, it's not just that he's not aware of how bad the writing is. He wants the writing to be bad. He wants it to be kind of loaded with political garbage and also to be highly predictable and comfortable. He wants it to be something that he already knows because that's something that's comfortable and feels good, and he feels like he's not going to waste his time when he watches, I don't know, a Boba Fett thing because he grew up liking Boba Fett or whatever it happens to be. So if he watches the Boba Fett show, it's because he already likes Boba Fett, and he knows he'll want to be interested in the show because he already likes Boba Fett. And if it's full of politics, that's good because, politics matter, and it's always year zero. It's never, the past is always needing to be rewritten, things like that. Same reason they might watch rewrites. So I think there's a big portion of the consumer base, the consumer, that really wants the formula, that really likes things to be comfortable. So the quality of writing for somebody who wants something new or original or moving or just well made or feels real, that's not the target consumer, I think, at this point. And someone mentioned on the last Star Wars video, I said, are people watching these shows? Is that there's a big portion of the consumer base that passively watches. Like, they have it as background to them doing something else. And I realized, oh man, that's actually been me in some cases with YouTube. Is like when I would play World of Warcraft, I'd be watching or listening to YouTube really on the other monitor while I ground. But there's people they have something on and their attention's always divided with the phone. So of course, whatever they're having on is not boring or interesting or compelling or requiring their attention to understand. So that's something I hadn't really considered. Give me your opinion on that, by the way. But yeah, I don't think there's any loss to humanity if the WGA is gone forever. If every writer is gone from Hollywood and the studios have already announced we're having AIs write the scripts in the meantime and we'll have them rewrite them. They already have an AI writing the script. They already have such a formulaic approach to how they produce things that an AI might as well write the scripts. There's no need for humans to think outside the box or do something weird or interesting or, synthesize disparate elements. You just have the AI do it and it'll fit into your formula just fine. So anyway, leave me your thoughts down below about that because I'd be interested to hear them. I don't know. It's no big loss to me. It'd be no big loss if they never produce another show because it's not like we'd run out of media and it's not like the shows were any good to begin with. But writers are paid really poorly. That is actually true. And if you look at the WGA demands, which they're not all of that different. They want residual royalties and stuff like that, which is doesn't really help the writing room guy. It doesn't help the newbie. It kind of helps established producers because they're the ones who are getting percentage points on everything. But anyway, leave me your thoughts down below and I'll read them and I'll see you guys next time. Have a great one.